to share this with you. I sat down with Alexander Zeidelson, CEO of Beam Project, and his right hand, Alex Romanov. I think we're good.
And we're rolling.
We're rolling. I am here today with Beam core team. I have Alexander, CEO of Beam Privacy Project, and Alex Romanov. How are you guys today? Please tell me first and foremost. That was my first question when I started to dive into the privacy matter within our community and within projects that are being developed right now. Why does privacy matter to you? And Alex, I'll start with you.
Since we're talking about money and financial transactions, I think it's kind of obvious that at least some of the information is not supposed to be like completely public. And unfortunately, in most cryptocurrencies, and especially in Bitcoin being the most popular cryptocurrency as of now, you can see quite a lot of data on the blockchain itself, which is, in my opinion, not very practical in many use cases, including business transactions and also personal transactions that I don't really want to reveal to just like anyone without any control. So there are some people that saying something like Bitcoin is a Twitter for your finances, but I think it's a little bit harsh. But still, I think it is important to have control over who can see which parts of your information, which is why when we developed Beam, we were focused on exactly this type of practicality, which means that you have both confidentiality by default, and also you have an option to reveal this information if you really need to whomever you like, but it is controlled by you, and you decide what you show and what you don't show and to whom.
Okay, thank you. And Alexander, would you like to elaborate on that? Why privacy matters?
So first of all, privacy, there is general privacy and financial privacy, right? So let's start with general privacy. And there used to be, and I think there still is, this misconception that I'm a law-abiding person, I'm a good guy, so I don't have anything to hide, right? So, but this is just plainly wrong, okay? Every person has things and details of their lives that they don't want everybody to know, right? Not because they're illegal, but because other people sometimes can be mean, and if they know everything about you or me, they will just start, making fun or asking questions, why, and just making fun of you, and it can be very unpleasant, right? We see all this bullying and on the internet and in real life. So there are some things you want to be private, and even things that are not necessarily related to your private life or your love life, but just normal things, where you go, where you buy stuff, who you're talking to. You don't necessarily want all of that to be available to everyone at every moment. So you want to keep certain things private and control your information. Very simple. And if every person just thinks of it for a little bit, they understand that they do have things they want to hide, or they don't want everybody to know. Like, we have some very close friends who know a lot about us, maybe still not everything, but we don't want everyone to know everything, right? Even if we're just very, very regular people, not doing anything special or not fighting anything, right? So that's good. And of course, if we're talking about political activists or business people and so on, or famous people, they want even more privacy. Now, if we go to finances, it becomes even more important, right? So, before cryptocurrencies, your finances were kind of private because, well, my neighbor doesn't know what's going on in my bank account, but my bank knows that, my credit card company knows that, and eventually the government knows that, and you have all this narrative that comes with you don't really control your money. That's where Bitcoin was born, right? Or cryptocurrency movement was born there. Let's get control back. Okay, and Bitcoin gave this control back, very much so, right? Nobody, my keys, my money, nobody can take it. But if we want to replace money, we also need to give privacy, because, again, with Bitcoin or any non-private means of payment, or any non-private form of money, it cannot really serve as money. Because even if I'm a private person, I don't want everyone to know how much I spend and where.
Absolutely.
Right? Because then people will ask me, well, you spent $100 at the liquor store. Are you an alcoholic? Or you're buying too much clothes? Or you're doing this, or you're doing that. You don't want that. And that seems like, okay, that's not that bad, okay, as a private person. But if I'm a business, what happens if all my competitors know exactly how much I'm paying into who? To my employees, to my partners, how much money I have in my account? You know, it is ridiculous, right? Somebody transfers you some funds using cryptocurrency, and then you can suddenly know how much they have in general. Does it make sense for a business? No, of course not. So this just shows that privacy is important in general for us as people, but for finances, it's also super important, because absence of privacy actually ruins the whole concept of, business, of competition. It cannot exist without financial privacy.
Yes.
Right. So and that's what Beam is actually addressing. This is the area we're addressing, because we believe that the crypto dream cannot be fulfilled without privacy.
Thank you very much. And I think I come from a pretty strong marketing background, and we know which direction the marketing and advertising is going, and through the information being given to the third parties, all our choices, in my opinion, that we make online, because we usually do make choices as far as purchases or what we like online, that is, in my opinion, very easily controlled if that data and information is actually owned by the third parties. And it can be very easily, the people can actually be very easily influenced, so the choices are not their own, but pretty much what's being pushed on them, if you will.
Yeah, that's right. It's a big problem that those, well, in the beginning, the internet was really decentralized and very nice and very diversified place. But today it's very consolidated. There are like 2, 3, 4, 5 companies that are controlling 95% of everything. And yeah, the amount of power and information they have about you is way too much. It's way too much. Yeah. But at least there, I could choose not to use Facebook. It's hard, but I could still choose not to use Google. But if it comes to money, I cannot, not use money at all, right? Unless I'm a farmer or somewhere and I have everything I need. But most people, you have to use money. Anyone has to use money, and the privacy there is also super crucial.
Okay. Based on the research that I've done on Beam, you're probably very aware that our crypto community is still very hermetic, and that sometimes causes a little bit of problem, especially with projects that are based on the same ideas, so to speak. And I want to mention Grin here. I wanted to know, because I read quite a lot about the structure operationally that Beam implemented. That was very different from what Gren was doing. So I would like to know a little bit for you to describe, and I think I'm gonna ask Alex, please describe the operational side of Beam, and why do you think the model that you've chosen actually works for the optimal results in the development of your project?
Sure. So when we started working on Beam as a project, it was in mid-February, like 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago. And at that point, Green was already developing for quite some time. And the idea of building a practical implementation of Mimblewimble protocol, which was published, I think it was 2016, June 2016, something like that, as a white paper on the internet. It was published anonymously. So Green started working on that a few months later in November, I think. And by the time we were just beginning to you know, actually assembling the team, thinking about how to build this, we were already like a year and a little over a year behind in terms of the time that Green had spent. So yeah, from one point we really wanted to have this Mimblewimble implementation, but Green was doing that in their structure of non-paid voluntary involvement,
Right. That was my
part-time. Yeah, and we saw that it's progressing, but it's progressing rather slowly. So we had an idea of actually attracting financing for this project and making it more like organized, company structured, and a little bit more commercial in this way. So we have started talking to investors who would be willing to participate in this project. And when we chose the model of how we would like to raise these funds, because it was obvious for us that in order to do this quickly and efficiently and effectively, we do need some funding.
Yep.
We decided to go for the treasury model. So the idea of the treasury model is that for the first 5 years of the project, every block generates a mining reward, 20% of which goes to the treasury and 80% actually goes to the miner. And of course, where there is halving, so both the mining part and the treasury part are also halved. And we actually had our first halving this year, and indeed the rewards were halved. So this created this perfect, for me, I think it's a perfect alignment of interest, because for the first 5 years, everybody, both the investors of the project, the core team, which also have the part of the treasury, and of course, the most important thing, which is the foundation, which gets the largest part of the treasury, because it's after the company money, the money that we raise, they basically run out. The foundation takes over the management and the decision-making of the project, and it also disperses funds directly from the treasury. So it creates this alignment of interest where everybody's interested in the long-term survival of the project. It's not an ICO where you just get the bulk of the money and then you have no motivation of doing anything at all, but just, you know, dividing this money amongst friends and going somewhere nice. But here, because of this structure of that the money is actually released in a monthly payment to everybody who participates in the core decision making, it actually creates very, very strong interest in the success of the project. And today we're at this point where the foundation took over already, and it governs the decision making, and also it gives the money to the developers. So everybody is interested in the Beam price being as high as possible, so we can do more things from one point. And nobody has a big, you know, stack of money to just do whatever he wants. So I think it was a good idea. And by what we did with this money, we actually hired a very high quality team of developers. Most of them are my good friends. I worked with them before. And this allowed us to do in about a little bit over 9 months, the same amount of work and even more. Much more than Green did in like 2 years. And we invested a lot of this money in bringing great designers and product managers that allowed us to create more usable and simple wallets. And we built a lot more tools around it, more ecosystem. And right now, I think if you take a look at the feature set between the two projects, and you see that Beam has much more functionality, and this functionality is also usable and very well designed.
Thank you. And that leads me to my question for Alexander. Although Beam is very, let's just say, sharp business oriented, and you have this goal oriented feel to Beam, you still were able to implement or use the open source code, which leads us to, you know, the grassroots. That's what people want in nowadays whenever the project is being developed. So Alexander, can you tell me, based on what I've seen, again, the open source, describe for us the structure, but from the developer side. What is it about Beam's foundation, technical foundation, that it's actually working for, again, for optimal development?
So first of all, if we're talking about the open source, right? If you're developing a cryptocurrency, that's the only way to go, right? I mean, you cannot develop a closed source cryptocurrency project today because nobody would ever trust it, right? So, and we have actually combined the open source practices and the community outreach, and it was not easy from the get-go because, you know, our team is very, and was back in the beginning, very experienced, but they were all experienced in very structured, you know, startups or more established companies in the way of work people do in established companies. And it's, in a lot of cases, in most cases, the source is not open. It's the thing that people guard like most closely to their chest, right? The companies don't open their source usually. So it took us some time, and it was not easy. But you know, we learned. We used outside, you know, even outside consultants to help us with that. And I think now we have created this good combination of our structured experience, especially in development, and the open source mentality. In general, I think, you know, coming to your previous question, Beam's model, the idea was, okay, we're developing a cryptocurrency, but we know that innovation is done best in a startup environment, right? So why don't we combine the two? And that's what we actually did, right? So we started with a startup model with funds from venture capital investors. And then, and you know, and back then people were very skeptical. You know, people in crypto are always very, very critical, but they said, no, it's a scam and blah, 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 you're making money. And, you know, but we said from the get-go that we will start as a centralized company, and then we'll move to a decentralized stage, because in the long run, it is better, because a company is vulnerable, right? A company that is centralized and has a CEO is more vulnerable than just a decentralized group of people. So at Beam, you know, both on the technology side and on the companies and on the project structure side, we took a combination of the two approaches. Okay, so I hope it makes sense.
Yes, it does. And usually, so far, when your project is presented, there's very often a question, how is Beam different than other privacy coins? I would like to maybe touch on it at the very end, but I am much more interested in the features, because from what I gathered is that Beam appeals a lot to businesses and to business investors. And there's two things that were very exciting for me to read about, which is the auditability and your confidential assets. And I would love for you to describe it to me and my audience in the easiest way. And please give me a use case of either or.
Okay, so let me start. So want to do the description of auditability and CA, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then we'll probably touch about differences with others. So in the beginning, we talked about the dream of replacing money, right? That's what crypto is all about. That's the end game, right? And that's why this area has such a huge potential. So we said that money must be confidential, right? But then on the other hand, businesses and people do not exist in vacuum. There is still, you have to pay taxes, right? You have to undergo audits if you're a business. So if you're creating money that you want everybody to use, this money needs to answer all those needs. It must give privacy, like cash does. It must give control, like a lot of crypto projects do. But and it also needs to give a way to be compliant. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a combination. So that's where this whole auditability discourse came from. So the idea of auditability is that people can choose whether they are fully confidential, fully private. They're not sharing their information with anyone. Nobody can see anything of what they're doing, but they can decide to have their information available to third parties. So if I'm a private person, Alexander, and I get my salary in Beam, and somebody else pays the taxes, before they pay to me, then I'm spending it like I don't want anyone to know anything about how I'm spending my money, right? But if I'm a business that operates with Beam, maybe I don't want to, but I have to be able to share my information with auditors and eventually the tax authorities. So that's what the auditability is. So every user decides, and only if they decide to be auditable, then they become auditable, and then they can give their information out to a specific party. Okay, in the same way, if I'm a business dealing with cash, I need to write all my, if I'm a law-abiding business, right? And again, I choose. But if I'm a law-abiding business, I write all my cash transactions in a book, and then I show this book to the auditor, and the auditor checks it, and then they let me pay my taxes, and I can sleep well and not have any issues. So that's what Beam Vision is about. Let the person, the user, choose. Either they're confidential, nobody sees anything, or they can share their information with a designated third party. That's the auditability concept. Okay.
And I believe that it's this, going back to what you said at the very beginning. So Beam pretty much covers the personal and the business, the same idea
Yes.
of the privacy and having that choice.
Yes, because again, it all comes back to this realizing the dream of replacing money. These are the things you need. They are not enough, right? You need adoption, you need a lot of other stuff, like we're seeing in crypto. We talked that the community is so small, but this is what you need to fulfill this dream. And that's what Beam is doing.
Super, thank you. And Alex, would you like to describe confidential assets and give us a use case for the confidential assets as it is supposed to work in the real world?
Yes, of course. So Beam is obviously some kind of currency that you can use either to like store of value, you can like accumulate it, or you can use it in as a medium of exchange, buy goods and services and things like that. But our vision is to be able to trade not just Beam, but basically any type of value that you could imagine. And this means that ultimately, if we take the long-term vision, you can basically trade anything on top of the Beam blockchain. And in order to fulfill this dream, we have created this very easy option of creating new types of tokens on top of Beam. In a way, it's very similar to Ethereum, but unlike Ethereum, it does not use smart contracts. It's basically a first layer capability of the platform. You basically have a new operation which says, I would like to create a specific amount of a new type of token. And the beauty of this is that this new token automatically inherits all the properties of Beam, which means privacy and confidentiality by default, and the scalability, because Mimblewimble as a protocol not just brings you confidentiality, but it also allows you to do this in a very efficient way in terms of the blockchain size. It does not increase the blockchain size significantly. On the opposite, it can make it even smaller than the regular transactions using Bitcoin or something like that. So this ability to create new types of tokens can be used in several scenarios. First of all, you can just create new coins, like a lot of people did in 2017 on top of Ethereum. You can do things like IPOs, ICOs, STOs, all kinds of token offerings, which are backed by either money or real assets. For example, you can tokenize real estate or anything else which you would like to do, and you can release this as a token on Beam. And this is actually very important because when we have talked to several organizations that are working on STOs, this ability to control for large investors who want to buy tokenized security for real estate, the last thing they want to do is to be front run by their competitors because they see exactly what they're doing on Ethereum. So they do need this privacy, as Alexander mentioned, as a viable part of their business. So this is one of the use cases. The other use case, which we're currently working on, is even more interesting because, as you know, one of the more, let's say, practical and very popular tokens on top of Ethereum and other networks is the stablecoin concept.
Yep.
And the stablecoin is basically this ingenious idea of being able to control the volatility and the value of a specific security by tying it either physically through a reserve option, like Tether, or by having some kind of algorithmic stabilization, like you have in DAI, the MakerDAO project, which is, by the way, absolutely magnificent and beautiful, and I really love it despite some issues that they had in the recent drop. But as a concept, it's unbelievably beautifully done. So these tokens already exist and people are using them despite the fact that they're not private. But what we would like to do is to allow to move these existing tokens to the Beam network and trade them privately and then move them back to the original network where they came from. And the way we are planning to do this is by building bridges,
Yes,
which are kind of a smart contract. Yeah, it's kind of a smart contract idea that you can lock some asset on one chain and then get the appropriate amount of the new confidential asset on Beam chain, and you can trade it confidentially. So we have this on our roadmap, which is published on our website. I think we will get there by the end of this year. And once we're there, and I think will be one of the more popular and the more interesting use cases for confidential assets on Beam, because it will really allow private and completely confidential transactions with stable coins, which will be really, really awesome. I would like to say one thing about one comment you made earlier about Beam being more business or enterprise oriented. Here's the thing, the combination that we're doing between being practical in business communities, but also being very hardcore decentralization and very classical crypto project. I think it's important to understand that we're playing both of these sides equally, and we do not prioritize one on another. And I think the best example of that is the atomic swaps feature, which allows you to exchange beams for Bitcoin or Litecoin and or Quantum
P2P. Today.
Yeah, exactly, completely decentralized without any third party which controls this transaction. And I think it's kind of this very pinnacle of decentralization and complete, lack of any centralized party controlling this transaction. I think it's a very beautiful feature that we have developed, and it's already in production and being used every day. And of course, the reason I mentioned that is because confidential assets are also be automatically part of these swaps. So you will be able to swap your newly created assets, and it's very important for trading because it takes time for the asset to get listed on enough exchanges to become popular. Mm-hmm. But here you kind of get this kind of atomic swap exchange inside Beam ecosystem, and I think it will also improve adoption of assets once they're released after our fork in 1 month.
And as far as features, bridges within your project were the last thing that I read about, and it looks very interesting. And it seems like your team is planning on creating bridges not only on Ethereum but also other blockchains. Is that correct?
Well, it depends. Ethereum, I think, will be our first choice because of the smart contract capabilities. But it really depends because so at least at first the bridges will be somewhat centralized. It's not exactly centralized. It's like federated. You have a group of
Mhm.
organizations controlling this, similar to what Liquid is doing in a way, not technologically, but conceptually. And if you're having this federated breach, what you want to do is to make it as trust minimized as possible. So the least trust you have in some party or group of parties, the better. Which is why I think
It's a great
Ethereum
point.
is, yeah, exactly. So you do, when you say trust, it's not a binary option, like you trust or not. You can trust somebody with $10, but you will not trust them with $1 million, right? So it's very important to have this trust as minimized as possible to actually make something which will be used, without any concerns or fear of, being cheated or any other collusion that might occur. Yeah, so this is why we chose Ethereum as our first option, because of the smart contract capabilities that do allow us to make these trust issues.
And the Beam atomic swaps are already fully functional, or okay?
Yeah, they are available. Yeah, people are using them every day.
Sounds great. As far as other features, you folks are obviously fully equipped with the wallets. I actually downloaded my own on the iPhone, and it works really good. As far as your website, it's very, very user friendly. I actually really enjoyed how the structure of the website works. I think it's very easy to navigate, even for somebody who is just starting with wallets and desktop wallets. Are all the desktop wallets already implemented?
Yeah, they are, but we are, all the features we're talking about, they will be developed and deployed across all the wallets eventually, yes.
Sounds great.
Yes, but actually, when we launched, we had wallets for all the desktop platforms. In the first 3-4 months, we added Android and iOS.
Mm-hmm.
So since, I think for the past, past year,
yeah, so
we are cross-platform fully.
One of the things, so the process, how it works is that we develop the infrastructure for the feature, and we add it to our command line wallets and the APIs, and then we we build it into the graphical wallets because it takes more time to build this UI, both in terms of the design. And by the way, our product manager will be very happy with your remarks about the usability and of our website and the wallet, because he works very hard to make them really simple and usable. But in addition to that, we're also expanding this ecosystem. For example, right now we're working on the web wallet,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's not just another interface. It's a little bit different in our case because, as you know, Mimblewimble is very different from Bitcoin and most other protocols because it's interactive. You have to have communication between the two wallets in order to create a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And this creates this problem or this nuance that these two parties, when we want to create a transaction, we have to be online, not necessarily at the same time, but during the same time period of, let's say, 12 hours.
The offline.
Yeah. So initially what we've done for the launch, we have created this system that's called SBBS. It's a secure bulletin board system. It's basically encrypted messages that you can send from one wallet to another. And this greatly simplified this process of creating transactions because the message stays in the system for like 12 hours. So you just have to be online at some point during the day and you will get your transaction. And this is, by the way, one of the differences between our project and Green in terms of the convenience and ease of transaction creation. And it's something that allowed us to do this very simply from the beginning. But still, even if you do that, you still have to have some point of communication via Telegram or any other messenger where you say, listen, Alexander, I would like to say to some Beam, come online or give me your address or something like that. So it's still some point of the inconvenience. So of course, if you're a business or you're an exchange, you have a wallet that's constantly running, but average people don't have this machine or server which is constantly up. So in order to improve that experience, we have created two things, which are, each of them is very special. And one of them is the web wallet. So the web wallet is basically a trustless service which runs somewhere, but it does not contain any secret information of yours. It does not hold your secrets, but it does allow you to create a remote kind of wallet and then receive this information and these notifications from the SBBS for you and notify your device.
Mm-hmm.
So when you receive a transaction, you receive a notification from the service to your mobile wallet on your iPhone, and then you just click yes, I accept, or no, I don't want to do this transaction, and that's it. So it's very, very easy, and you don't have to come up online every few hours to just check whether you received any transaction.
And go ahead.
Another thing that we did, we have developed a mechanism for completely offline transactions.
Yeah.
Just like Bitcoin, you receive some kind of an address, and then you can do offline payments to the other side without having any communication with it. And the way we did it, we used this very interesting protocol that was developed recently by a cryptographer called Aram Zhivanyan. Originally, this was created in cooperation with the Zcoin project, this development. It was a paper that's published, and he basically invented a new type of protocol, which is called Lilantus, and you may have heard this mentioned on our website and documentation also. So Lilantus allows us to create these offline payments, and not only are they going to be offline, they're going to be in a way even more secure than the regular Mimblewimble, not in terms of security, but in terms of linkability. So because what Lilantus gives you is that this protocol creates a shielded pool where you just can put some coins into it, and then you take out completely new coins which are unlinked from any previous transactions.
Yes.
Yeah, and this solves one of the original problems of Mimblewimble of traceable, like theoretically, right? It's not a simple procedure. It's very difficult to trace even the basic Mimblewimble transactions, but with the addition of Lilantus, you can improve even on that parameter as well. So basically, all these features that I'm talking about, it's not theory. It's already being tested right now for the next fork. Basically, all these features have been implemented, and they're on MasterNet, which is our development network, and they will be released to testnet in a couple of weeks, and then to mainnet in about a month.
Thank you, and I think that's the direction that we want to go, to make it easier and correct me if I'm wrong, but somewhat connected to your messaging system. I think that's where the whole blockchain is heading towards, at least to connect with it, just in order to create the mass awareness of the blockchain. And
let me give you another interesting example. In our last version 4.2 that we released a couple of weeks ago, we have added an ability to have your Beam value shown in either BTC or US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works is using the same SBBS system. We can just broadcast specific messages from a specific source. And it solves the problem of exposing your IP address of your wallet to some service, because the SBBS works completely in a completely distributed way by these messages being broadcast in the network. So you don't access any central point to get this information. So you both get the update of the current value of Beam, and also you don't expose your IP address to any central server, which is beautiful, I think.
It's very exciting how quickly it changes and how new ideas are being developed. And I love from the idea, from the start, when the idea is actually created, they're being so quickly implemented, and people like you, Alex, and Alexander are putting it into reality, which I think is wonderful. I do have two more things. I know that you folks are working constantly on developing even deeper within the privacy, but I notice your plans are actually into even lending, which is based on scriptless scripts, and I would like for you to maybe give us a little bit of a overview of how scriptless scripts work for Beam.
So let me just give maybe a broader comment, and then Alex will give you a more technical part. So in general, our movement or the vision, like we started with money that's confidential and opt-in compliant, but the overall vision is even bigger. It's a whole ecosystem of a confidential financial ecosystem or confidential DeFi ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and this includes confidential assets, and this includes using various technologies to allow for lending, creating stable coins, and other things, right? So all those building blocks are steps to get to this full-fledged confidential DeFi ecosystem. Okay, so and then Alex can explain the scriptless scripts.
Yeah, so scriptless scripts, not only is it hard to pronounce, but also it's kind of this confusing name. It was originally coined by Andrew Poelstra, who
Yep.
was one of the leading cryptographers who investigated the Mimblewimble protocol at the very beginning. And in fact, his work allowed both Green and us to build on top of this idea because he proved the viability of this protocol and the soundness of the idea. So the difference between a scriptless script and the more common or more well-known smart contract is that unlike smart contracts, which is basically a full-fledged like programming language, where you can create basically almost any program and then write it and then run it on the blockchain and using the data from the blockchain, the scriptless script is just a list of elements like building blocks that you can activate from using some external commands like using transactions. It does not run on the blockchain itself. But what it can do for you, it can validate the result of some calculation. Let's say we perform some kind of processing and we calculate some results. And now for the blockchain to accept it, we need all the nodes or the majority of the nodes in the system to agree that this result is actually valid. So what is happening in scriptless script, and which is different from the smart contract, the calculation itself does not take place on the blockchain. It takes place elsewhere. But the validation of the result takes place on the blockchain. And then if everybody agrees or the majority agrees, this result is written to the blockchain. This is the main difference. So what are the advantages and the disadvantages? So the most, I think, important disadvantage of scriptless script is that you still have some, you have to have some centralized point of calculation. You cannot create contracts that are completely decentralized in every way. But on the other hand, you don't have these problems, as we have seen several times, with bugs in the smart contracts, which are very difficult to debug and get, and they result in the loss of funds for the people participating in this specific contract. So if we're willing to do this kind of trade-off of giving up some of the centralization, but what we're gaining is much more efficiency and much more control over the calculation. And this is very suitable, for example, for cases like STOs, where you have to have some kind of centralized banking security,
Yes.
which is physically controlled by some enterprise or entity. For these cases, this is perfect combination. And what we're doing is basically creating this ecosystem and the platform, as Alexander said, so anyone could build applications, use these primitives. And thus basically make this confidential DeFi possible using very large variety of tools, which are not limited to Solidity or any other scripting contract, but rather you can build an application in almost any programming language and then make it interact with our blockchain so we can validate the result.
Thank you very much for explaining that. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on? Anything that is crucial to when you actually present Beam project to a wider audience, or if there is there something that you want people to know about it?
So I would say that we want people to know that Beam is a project that really wants to check all the boxes in making crypto
Looks that way for sure.
replace
Yes.
money. That's one thing. It's the best privacy coin with the best privacy features, but it also very, very, very usable, right? All our products are very beautiful, very easy to use, and this way it also is fulfilling the mission of being accessible to everyone and anyone, and eventually for all the purposes that money will serve. And this is, and Beam is actually a project that has the potential to replace money eventually.
Thank you. And Alex, would you like to add anything about the core values of Beam and what your team is working on?
Yeah, so I think one of the, in addition to everything Mr. Alexander has said, an additional reason to check out Beam and to follow this project, and it's not about buying Beam or anything else, but the reason to take a look at what we're doing is because we are doing real innovation. The team is very focused on not just implementing someone's ideas, but also on improving on them, in creating very interesting and high quality implementations of important building blocks for any blockchain. So we're constantly trying to improve things, make them more, optimal, not easier, but let's say, allow additional functionality on top of it. For example, this combination of Lelantus and Mimblewimble is something that is unique. Our implementation of the swaps and how we did it is kind of unique, because this is something that is very new, this idea of confidential cryptocurrency and atomic swaps. We're constantly doing a lot of experiments. We create a lot of new kinds of mechanisms and infrastructure. So I think, and we're very serious about it. So we really want to build the best product, not only, for the end user, of course, but also as a part of, let's say, overall evolution of the space. Because after all, we're all interested in cryptocurrency becoming more popular, more accessible, more stable, more innovative, right? And I think in this regard, we contribute a lot. As you know, all the code is open source, so a lot of projects, not just forks, but basically other projects take ideas from us back as well, which is very good because it enriches the ecosystem. So yeah, I think this is the point, additional point why you should probably follow Beam, try Beam, and look at what we're doing, because we're doing a lot of interesting stuff on top of everything else.
And thank you for that. I actually, based on my, when I went to Beam website, which is beam.mw for Mimblewimble, you can almost use Beam for somebody who never downloaded a wallet to almost like a guide of how to start using cryptocurrencies. I'm talking about the mobile wallets, I'm talking about desktop. Even I do believe that you folks are trying to even bring mining and try to portray it that it's not that complicated. And is there anything that you would like to mention on the mining side?
Well, mining is obviously the key part of any proof of work cryptocurrency, and we work a lot with miner community, and we talk to them all the time and provide help. And we have a special Telegram channel, and we have support for miners. We also made it easy for people to mine on their PCs. Although frankly, right now with the size of the network, a single person alone, without joining a mining pool, cannot really generate anything significant. But we also provide guides for people joining mining pools, because we really want as many people to mine as possible, because that's what makes the currency stronger.
Okay.
Right. So, and in general, as you mentioned, our goal is to make everything accessible to anyone. A lot of projects are building stuff that's only usable by geeks, and that hampers their progress. And our approach from the get-go was to make it available to everyone.
And I want to thank you for that, because that's if that is your goal, or it was your goal at the very beginning of your development, you definitely at least reached that, because that was the feel and the ambience of it overall that I got from going to your website and exploring Beam as a whole, the whole structure, starting from personal to business, and how you apply the newest blockchain technology and protocols to develop easier and more user-friendly features. So I would like to thank you for that. Last, I do know that the Ledger and wallets are in the development, the connection, or how is that working?
Yeah. Okay. So I would like to say one more thing about mining, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, basically, I would like to give this kind of a shout out, let's say, to Lolly, who is the great guy who helped us and is continually helping us with all the mining related things, including the development of Beam Hash, which is basically a modified equihash algorithm.
Okay.
And in the first fork, we have announced two scheduled forks at the beginning of the project in order to avoid ASICs in the long run, like in 1.5 years since the launch. So our second fork is coming, and Lolly modified Beam Hash once for the first fork to create Beam Hash 2, which was 30% more efficient. And now he is currently working on Beam Hash 3, which is going to be even more amazing. And we will soon publish the details of this new mining algorithm for the second fork. So that's for the mining part.
And is that Quorum from your team?
He is our longtime advisor.
Oh, okay. I thought, because I had a really great quote from him, I do believe from your website, that it talks about the mobile wallet, how it increases adoption, and that is going to definitely help on the development.
No, I'm not sure that's the same guy, but and Lolly is also part of the Beam Foundation. So if you go to the Beam Foundation,
okay,
page,
I'm going to research that after.
Yeah, you will see him there.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Is there anything else? Please do.
No, you asked another question before regarding something else, not mining. What was that? The last question you asked, and then I spoke about mining, and then I forgot.
It's support for offline
Ledger
wallets. Yes.
Yeah. So we're currently working on the Trezor T model, and it took us quite a long time to work on that because there were a lot of difficulties, both internally in terms of implementing the specific cryptography that we need, because it is different by what is provided by default in the libraries that are included in the hardware. So basically, the hardware wallet is a very small embedded device which has not too much memory and not too much computing power. So if you need to do something which is non-standard, and in our case, for example, we're using something that's called the bullet proofs, which is the zero knowledge non-interactive range proofs that are very efficient. And we use that to prove that the transaction value is positive, so you cannot cheat. And this specific implementation of ours is different, or it's not used in the standard, like in Bitcoin or most standard cryptocurrencies. So some of that we had to code differently. And then, since there's not enough space on the device, we should either talk to the manufacturer to put it into the default, default implementation, or we have to find all kinds of things. So that was the first type of difficulty that we have encountered. And the second one was because of this interactivity that you have these SBBS addresses, we had to implement internally inside Beam a different mechanism that would allow secure communication using SBBS, even though you're actually signing this on your hardware wallet. So we kind of did all that. And right now, I believe we are on the final stretch of this way. You know, in the process, everything changed and Beam changed, and then the hardware wallet changed. So there was a lot of back and forth. But I think that we will release at least the demo version with the firmware that we have signed, not necessarily the official one yet, but we will release a demo version with the self-signed firmware in the next couple of months. I really hope so.
Thank you very much, and thank you for spending your time and describing Beam Project to me and giving us a lot of valuable information, but also making it easier. I really do appreciate it, and I wish the most luck to your team, and hopefully you folks are staying healthy during this unfortunate situation, and I do wish you all the best for the future. I'm very excited to follow Beam and promote it actually because of what information I gained from it.
Thank you, Laurianna. I think it was a great conversation. The amount of effort that you put into, learning stuff about Beam, that even it's always a pleasure to talk to someone who kind of made a lot of background research, and it was really great. And we, of course, we're all for making Beam known to more and more people, and we also appreciate people participating in our community, in our grassroots marketing efforts, and also in our development efforts. So I'm using this stage to call for everyone, to join us as a community member or ambassador or a developer. Go to our website, join our Telegram channels or newsletters. There's a lot to learn and a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of great conversations going on.
Thank you very much, and again, good luck, but I will definitely be following closely how the project is developing, and thank you for letting me learn a lot, and especially about Mimblewimble. It was kind of an obsession of mine. I first heard of it during Magical Crypto Conference when Andrew was presenting it, and it's very exciting to see that crypto community is developing on top of the projects that are already fascinating, and you're just trying to make it even better. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Laurianna. Thank you.
Thank you.
This commences my interview with Beam. I hope you enjoyed it, and please do subscribe. I would like to see you push the button at the bottom.